Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's episode of SES TV. I'm your host today. I'm Felix Michalski, student at BUAS. And today we're going to talk about the topic of GDPR for the next couple of minutes. Before we start to get into the topic of GDPR, I would like everybody in this round, as you're the experts of this topic, to introduce yourself, including your name and the topic you're going to specialize on today. And I also have a short, surprising question for you. It's a guessing question. I don't think too much of it. Just try to say what comes up to your mind. How many tweets are sent out to the world each day? You can start.
So my name is Lisa van den Boer, and I'm going to tell about the sensitive data, sensitive personal data today. And I think per day there were sent out 100 million tweets.
All right. My name is Doyle Bogers, also student at Breda, specialized sports and esports. Today I will be representing the topic of the consumer, and specifically what is their point of view surrounding the GDPR for them. And my guess would be like regarding the tweets, maybe 50 million, something like that.
So I'm Jeroen van Breda. I will be representing the companies in the GDPR, and my guess will be around 10 million.
Hello, my name is Mihna Done, and today I'm going to be talking about the GDPR from the government perspective. And to answer your question, exactly like 2 million tweets a day would be my guess.
2 million tweets, you say? Yeah. Lisa was closest to that. It's actually 500 million. And I just wanted to implement this because I think that's just a crazy figure to think, and it should just give us a better understanding of how huge big data nowadays really is. I also have some other facts if you're interested. Each day there are 294 million emails sent, 65 billion WhatsApp messages sent, 5 billion web searches made. When you think in those dimensions, I think it's pretty clear that you have to find a way to protect the individual and their privacy regarding the data situation. And that's exactly why GDPR was established. Now, I want to quickly go through the history timeline of GDPR just in order to get kind of where GDPR is coming from. The right to privacy was established in 1950 by the European Convention on Human Rights, which states everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home and his correspondence. So this protection at that time was, back then ensured just through legislation. But from the 29th of October in 1969, everything changed because that was the birth of the internet. And obviously, it didn't change exactly from that point on. But, as we all notice, the internet developed. And that's why in 1995, the European Union decided to establish a new European Data Protection Directive, which stated that minimum data privacy and security standards. And just a few things to mention that happened right after this. The first online banner advertisement was done. Online banking was established, and Facebook, or how we now say Meta, the whole social media imperium exploded. And that should just give you a whole understanding of how fast we developed in the past 25 years, and that technology has transformed our lives in ways nobody of us could have ever imagined. And that's why GDPR entered into force in 2016 after passing the European Parliament, and as of 2018, all organizations were required to be compliant. And now that I'm finally done with my monologue, we can start with a quick round in order to understand what exactly the rights of GDPR are. And for this time, I would like to start with you, Michna.
Okay. I'm gonna give insights on two rights out of the 8 that you just mentioned. So the first right that I'm gonna give insight is the right to be informed, and this basically means that any organization have and must give you all the information needed. So with what purpose you are using your data, the retention period that is going to be used, and to whom they will send and share this data with. And the second right that I'm going to give insight is the right to object processing, and which this basically means that you as an individual have the right to stop or prevent the organization for using your data with the follow purpose that they have. So those are the rights that, yeah.
All right, you want to move on?
Yeah, so I have the right to access, which basically means that an individual has the right to request a copy of their personal data that a company has of them. And then my second right is the right to not be subject to automated decision making, which basically means that an individual has the right not to be subject to a decision-based or like an automated process.
Algorithm. An algorithm.
An algorithm, so that they have an own say in that.
Yeah. For the fifth right within the GDPR rules is the right to rectification or the right to correction. What this basically means is that if you have given information that is inaccurate or incomplete, that you have the right to, in the database, change this. And the company must, or you can demand a company to change this information without undue delay in 1 month. So in that specific time, they should have changed it. And the sixth right is the right to erasure or the right to be forgotten. This is basically a concept that individuals have the civil right to remove personal data from the internet, cloud, or data bank. This does not only apply to the internet, which there's of course also e-privacy, which goes more hand in hand with that, but also if you have signed up for a gym, for example, and you cancel your subscription, then you could also use your right to remove your data from that data bank. Yeah.
So for me, the seventh right I'm going to talk about now is the right to data portability. This allows individuals to request companies for their data, and it also makes it easier to transfer data from company to company. And the eighth right, the last right of GDPR is the right to restriction of processing. And this allows individuals to limit a company for using their data.
All right, so that's well, a lot for the start. I think now it's time to get into the discussion and just to transfer the knowledge we have now into daily business. So I would like to stick with you, Lisa, and ask you the question. How do you see the growth of big data impacting on compliance of companies and on business responsibility?
Yeah, like you already mentioned, in May 2018, the law of GDPR has applied in the EU. And from that moment on, there were a lot of consideration for people who are working with projects with big data. But the first thing the people have to do is to ask if their project involves big data or not. Because if their project doesn't involve big data, they don't have to care about the GDPR rules and they just can let them as they are. But if you use big data in your project, you really have to take care about the GDPR rules. Because they're really strict. And the key for the project is also that you are open about the data, about for what you're gonna use the data, which kind of data you're gonna use, but also what can be outcomes for the individuals. And this also is going to one of the principles of GDPR, and that's the principle of fullness, fairness, and transparency. So always be open to to the individuals about what you're going to use the data and when and that kind of things. So that's really an important part that's changed. And also another important part is the accountability in GDPR. That's also one of the seven principles. That has changed a lot in the past years, because now as a company you really have to documentate everything you do on the project, the data you're gonna use, and like everything has to be documented really strictful, so that the EU can check your documents, that you are doing it well and that you are using and that you are looking to the GDPR laws. And if you are not doing that as a company, the EU can give you fines about that. So it's really important for a company to look at the GDPR rules, and that have changed a lot in the years, so that they really have to be strict on the rules and to really look into it when in the project.
Okay, yeah. I assume, as you said, only the companies that use big data have to care about GDPR.
Yeah, exactly.
I assume a lot of companies do that nowadays. I suggest there are not a lot that don't use data, or actually they should if they are not. But anyways, especially regarding those principles that you mentioned, I think that's something that we could talk with the company's perspective. And I just would like to ask you the question, how does that translate into the reality for businesses?
Yeah, so as Lisa already mentioned, there are a lot of companies that use big data, for example like banks or online web shops. And the one change when the GDPR policy established was that they have to provide more information to everyone on how they process their data. So how do they store it? How do they keep it? They have to be very transparent about that. And one of the principles of GDPR is the principle of purpose limitation, which means that organizations can only use personal data that is collected for specified, explicit and legitimate purposes. So they can only use people's data for example, making your product better or your service. So that's just an important principle in this GDPR policy, because that makes companies only use their personal data for like purposely reasons.
So there shouldn't be like profiling, like social profiling, just based on data, because that's where we are getting away from that purpose reason behind collecting data, right? Okay. Yeah.
If I may interrupt at this point, before you mentioned the transparency, and that is really important for the consumer part, because of course we want to know what our data is being used for. That's essentially what GDPR is, why it was founded, because we want to have that transparency between the company and us, the consumer. So honesty has a big part in GDPR, but a lot of companies do try to use our data to improve their product or service so that the customer could profit from it. But essentially what that turns into is that you profit as a company from us, the consumer. Like, how do you improve your company with these? And essentially what you do, and this is why GDPR was basically founded, is because you diminish our rights with the data we give. An example is, like, as you said before in the beginning, that there's such a rapid technological growth in the last 50 years. In a way, we sort of are going too fast, because the rights that have been founded in 2018 should have been there a long time ago. If I could use an example for this, there is a massive Facebook scandal known as the Cambridge Analytical Data Scandal. What this was used for is data was breached by the Cambridge Data Analytical, but that was without the consent for the consumers. And what they used this data for is for political advertising. Like this is in 2016 when Donald Trump was promoting his campaign. But they used this data to essentially psychologically influence the swing voters. Swing voters are those that are in doubt to, again, vote for Donald Trump. But with this data that they have about us, and especially on Facebook, since it's a platform which you can be very open about things, they essentially abuse your rights. And this is a big scandal that is very problematic. Because it is an unfair psychological influence, and even Mark Zuckerberg had to testify for this and was fined £500,000 just because of this scandal. So going into the future, it's very hard to keep it transparent, because the lines are so blurred within the purposes of GDPR. Like an example would be, how what do you do with the data that has been stored for 10 years ago? How long is that data stored? What do they use it for? Like the missing details that we have about this create mistrust, and that is also why we need to bring more awareness surrounding e-privacy and GDPR.
Yeah, so if I may interrupt you. You said like the data you have from 10 years ago. I think that we as companies, we should have like certain deadlines for how long we can store personal data.
Right.
So like, for example, after 2 or 3 years, the deadline has passed and then all your data is just gone. And I think in that way, it's better and also more fair for the consumer, so that they know, okay, my personal data is now gone because the deadline has passed.
Right, but the tricky part with that is, like we also want companies to grow. We want to have a better experience in events and other sort of stuff, which personal data must be used for. But the problem is that the lines are so blurred, and I get that companies need that, but that also diminishes our rights. Like an example would be the fact that you said, like the automated decision making. But yeah, to sum it up, basically, companies need to be more transparent about it. And yeah, how can we do that? That's sort of the question we must answer.
Well, I think we tried to answer this question and during that discussion, but to just get into a different direction, I would ask you something, Michna, you as the perspective of the government. What are you going to do about this if a company breaks GDPR regulations?
I'm glad that you brought that up, Felix, actually. And to be frank with you, the penalties can be quite harsh if the companies don't comply with the rules and regulations of the GDPR. And fines for those who do not comply can start from 20 million euros or the 4% of annual income of any companies or organization. And to give an example on how high penalty can go, Amazon was fined with 888 million euros. That is quite high even for Amazon, even though they have so much revenue getting into the company. But yeah.
Can you repeat that figure again?
Sure. It was around 888 million euros.
Okay. So as you said, even for Amazon, that's a huge amount of revenue they lose on.
Amazon, if they are receiving so much revenue yearly, then.
And it would be probably even higher now that they already received a penalty. And,
definitely. That's for sure.
And that they even make more revenue nowadays.
Yep.
Okay. I get that those are severe penalties that also affect the companies, but I still think that this just have an indirect influence on the consumers' trust, or let's better say mistrust, towards the companies, and that regard also towards the government that sets the GDPR rules. I think one very good example of mistrust, and maybe you can help me with that, Lisa, is I guess all of you know that situation that you are interested in a specific product, and you've probably already talked with friends about it, that maybe I'm going to buy this the next couple of days, and all of a sudden advertisement it appears on Instagram or on whatever social media platform you use that wants you to buy exactly this product. Could you kind of explain how this even how that is possible?
Yeah, so first I want to start that we will never exactly know what happens in between that. But I want to start like every phone and every laptop everyone uses nowadays has a speaker in it. But no, they are not tracked. They are, sometimes you can get tracked on if you're gonna use on, for example, your Apple iPhone Siri. Then Siri can be tracked, but they don't track everything you say to your phone or to your laptop. So that's not a reason how they can get the advertisements on your Facebook, on Instagram page or something else. But there are some other things how they can go on your, how they know what you like. For example, if you Google it, then they follow you what you are Googling, and they know what you like. But also, yeah, speech analysis, it's impossible to really analyze everything because there are too much users on phones and laptops. So that's not the reason how they can do the advertisements. Also, they are not tracking you on WhatsApp or Facebook. Only Facebook is sometimes looking into chats, but that's only to find if they have any virus on it. But that's not to check what do you like or something else. But also sometimes if you're gonna talk with friends about something you like, about shoes or something, it can be possible but that a few days before you Googled on that kind of shoes. So then they know what you like. But also another big thing, if you share your location, you also share your information. Because if you have shared your location, Google can follow you everywhere. They can follow to where you go to, at what time you go somewhere and everything. So maybe you go to a supermarket or you go to a clothing store. They know exactly at what time you've been there and also how much time you have been there into. So then they also can look, oh, maybe that person wants something from this brand or something else. So then they can share you the advertisement. So yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons they know it. But also all the cookies on the websites. Yeah. If you allow them to track you. So if you're on a website and you allow the cookies, you allow them to track you and to look, where you're searching for and that kind of things. So the cookies is also a big thing into the advertisements.
So, can I to give a concrete example for the listeners at home, basically, with what you said about the location, to put a perspective that you know, because of course you have witnessed this. If you have your location on your phone and you went to a store and you get Google asks you like, how was the visit to this place? That's exactly what we mean with that. So, just to give a concrete example that you know what we're talking about, because everybody has experienced it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Doyle. So yeah, I think I can just sum it up in a way where, let's keep it that way. You have to give permission to the companies, for example, with activating your location. So that is basically the only way how they can track you, and it's more like kind of selective awareness that you might have talked about a product that you want to buy with friends, but that is really not the case. Why they know what to offer you as an advertisement, right?
Exactly, and let's make one thing clear: without any permission of you, they cannot track you. So it's because of you. You share your location or you accept the cookies.
And I think that is exactly the point where the ordinary consumer kind of gets left behind, because first of all, this whole tracking and cookie topic, I think that's something a lot of people don't really understand and are probably also just too lazy to always deny the cookies. Yeah. Maybe that is a topic for you, Doyle.
Yeah, exactly. For example, I had an interview with Bastiaan Dennis, who is the owner of privacy.eu. This is a company that basically gives you a preparation test for your CPPE, which is basically your professional degree for GDPR and that you understand the rules, etc. But what we sort of forget very easily is that this should be a given. These are the rights you have as a consumer, which makes it very difficult for you to know all of this. Because why should you be informed about this if this is your right? And that's sort of the problem we have with a lot of companies, is that they forget that you might not know this stuff, but you should know it. So that's a tough topic, because the lines are also very blurred of what can companies do and what can't they do. And yeah, that just makes it very difficult. And yeah, that also creates a sort of looming danger for data breaks, because what if somebody knows you? An example would be phishing in the Netherlands. If a bank or someone of a bank calls you, like, we know these things sound very stupid and you will fall into it yourself, but it is a looming danger. And with a simple data breach like your, like where you were born, the stuff like this, just very basic information can already lead to a very dangerous scam. So that's why, yeah, more reason should be given as to why you should care for GDPR.
And I think that companies should inform the consumers about their rights that they have.
Definitely.
So they should be informing them about the right to be informed and the right to accessibility. Those are the two important things that you as a consumer should know about, because that could provide some of these horrible things that they will happen.
Yeah, I have a question for both, like the company and the government. Then, how would you raise awareness around GDPR and just basically your safety for the data you have been given? What would you do to, like, make the lines more clear?
Well, firstly, we need to get people more educated on how their personal data is being used, and also, as you mentioned earlier, transparency is key. And as a government point of view, we need to have different perspective within the subcultures on a society, because on one hand we have the younger generation which has access and can access easily the internet, and also maybe why not implement new subjects in schools such as IT. As for the older generation, we as well need to create ways for transparency, because for the older generation it's quite hard to get into those online searching, and you know how it is. And yeah, as a government we decide for our people, and we also want their rights to be respected. And on the other hand, we want to give the companies a chance to grow, and on the long run I think we can both benefit from this, so this is why it's great.
Yeah, and I think companies should maybe inform everyone when they fill in their personal data to do something at a certain company, that they should inform them about their rights that they have. I think that would be a great solution, so that the consumers will know the rights that they have. I think that's a good solution.
I think I would like to refer to one point that you made that I think is very important to understand from your perspective, that you try to kind of satisfy both perspectives. One is the consumer and one the company, because on the one hand you want privacy rights for the population, but also growth within the companies and innovation, because in the end also the population will profit from innovations, right? Yeah. I think I have a pretty good example for this. It's not quite the sports sector, but I've had my internship in the pharmaceutical industry at Roche Pharma in Germany. And yeah, we also had this topic in the department I worked, where we try to find ways to convince patients about giving their data. It was in this sector of Alzheimer's disease, and yeah, we just try to find ways how to tell them, hey, it's good if you share the data with us, because in this way we can make the medicine better. We can help you, but also other people within your society. And I think that's one of the key elements that we, well, as companies, but also as government, need to care for, that we should try to show what data really has an effect on us, and as a positive effect. But also, of course, we still need to keep in mind the privacy rights.
Yeah, as you mentioned, as long as the personal data is used only with one purpose, and that for development, as for the pharmaceutic example that you gave. So if the patients are giving the personal data to the medics in order for to find better solution in healthcare, then I think that they would agree if only they use this for only this purpose.
Yeah. And you were also talking about different approaches towards different subcultures. Mm-hmm. For example, well, children that you could find solutions with IT subjects in school, for example, to show them GDPR. I think the children topic is a very specific one because the situation around GDPR is a different one, and I think maybe you can help me out with that topic.
Yeah, inside of GDPR we have one article, and that's Article 8, and that's all about GDPR and children and how the regulations are there. And the regulation in the EU is that a child has to be 16 years older, and then they can be tracked. If they're under the 16, the parents or the holder of responsibility of the child needs to give permission that you can track that child or you can use the data of the child. So that's the important thing is if they're under the 16, then they really have to need permission from the parents to use the data of the child. This rule can be changed in the different countries of the EU, because all countries can set self which age they want. So not lower than 13, but also there are some countries that are saying from 14 years old they can give the permission by themselves. But most of the countries are using the age of 16 years old. So then they before that the parents need to give permission for using the data of the child.
Okay. Now you were talking about a different topic, the handling of GDPR rights in different countries, and I think that's something where you can help me out again as a government perspective. Just imagine the situation where, for example, as a European wants to buy something from an online store in Australia, does GDPR also apply here for me? Do I have the same rights as I would buy something here in Europe?
Well, it surely does. The company can be outside of Europe. So, for example, as you mentioned, Australia, and as you, an European, give your personal data to that company, then automatically the rules apply for that company in Australia as well. So, as long as a company works with people within Europe, then the fines and regulation apply to them as well. So that's why they need to comply with the regulation of the GDPR.
Okay. Well, that's certainly good to know. I think this is a basic question that I could have asked earlier, but that just came up to my mind, and it sounds odd, but I want to ask that you, Doyle, imagine being like a completely normal, ordinary person that doesn't have to do anything with criminal situations. Why should I even be afraid to hand over my data? Because, in the end, I'm not a criminal and I have nothing to hide.
Right. Well, as I mentioned before, with the looming danger of like phishing and spoofing, stuff like this is very difficult to grasp, basically, because how do they know your data? So, in a sense, online privacy and e-privacy is in jeopardy if not for the GDPR. So, yeah, it should be a given, but you should not be afraid since we have the GDPR. But the problem that comes back again at that point is that not a lot of people are informed. So, yeah, should you like be afraid to hand over your data? Not if you're well informed. That basically sums it up. But what you should be aware about the possibility of data breaches which result in scandals.
I think that kind of brings us to to the basic question: where do we set the limits? Like, which data should be allowed to collect and which are not? Where is there like an ethical thought for companies? Do they only have to do they only have to care for the GDPR rules, but when they are compliant with that, they can just do whatever they want with the data? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think going back to the perspective that companies can only use data that is only purposeful for their product or their service. I think, for example, using data that you're Christian or something like that, that should not be important for them. So that kind of data should be, they shouldn't get access to that, I think, for me as a company perspective.
I would agree, and essentially how we can solve this problem is to basically create a perfect synergy between the government, the companies, and the consumer. Because if the government would blur the lines, or would not blur the lines like they do right now with the principles and the rights, and we would be informed, or the government would inform us, so especially for small children, as you said before, if we just have a class for this and that we know what we can do to prevent this, then that would be great, because then we would be informed so that there won't be an advantage on us. And in return, if we have created that trust, then the companies can play on that and basically develop themselves and improve their products and services, and then we feel safe. And then that is the solution, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that also leads us to the question of how do we create more transparency, and how do we convince people to give permission to their data just by showing them the benefits from it. I think a good example that everybody remembers is when we went to Zandvoort, to CN.com, where they were talking about the Zandvoort circuit race in Formula One, and where they collected data in order to, try to figure out who is going to get into the, I'll say arena now, it's not an arena, but you know what I mean, from which, entrance. And they also try to figure out who's coming by a bike, who's coming by a train. And in that way, they just try to make it as comfortable as possible for the consumer in that case. And,
you just put an emphasis on safety.
And I think the same goes for the crowd safety, for example, that we heard already, that you are getting filmed in the stadium, but that is just the case because the stadium owners and the safeguards want you to be safe in that environment. So, I think we've talked a lot about GDPR now. If anyone has questions in this round, please feel free to ask.
First of all, thanks for all the enlightening information, and I really like the fact that you all had different point of views, but I missed a little bit the point of view for the sports and esports event. How do they use and share, for example, the data for certain football matches or sports events or esports events? Well,
first of all, I think our approach to this was to make it a bit more basic, because GDPR is not something that only is a topic for sports and esports, but also for other industries. But I think you've had a pretty good example for the football situation, right?
Yeah, you can see, for example, when a player gets injured for a certain type of club. Back in the days, the club could just say like, oh, he's injured on his leg or something like that, just a very basic example. But nowadays you see a lot of times that when a trainer is asked like, oh, what's wrong with him, that the trainer says like, oh, we can't say that due to the privacy of that player. So you see that in sports and also probably esports players and events as well, that privacy becomes more important, and you can't just provide everyone information that not everyone should be able to get.
So you had a good panel discussion about GDPR, but I'm wondering, and I'm curious, why is GDPR important for us to know within the sport industry? Because you didn't talk a lot about the sport industry as you mentioned yet. So why is it important, GDPR and sport industry?
Yeah, GDPR is used like everywhere, and also in the sports industry. If you have a seasonal card for a club or something, they have all your data as well. They use the big data as well. So it's also in the sports industry. It's important because if you buy a ticket, you have to give your information as well. Also, if you buy a ticket only for one time, you give your information, and from that on they can send you emails or something to maybe attract you more, to come more, and that kind of things. So also in the sports industry, the data is used a lot. So for that, the GDPR is important. That you have to know that if you want to give your data, if you only go one time to a match or something. So do you want that they have your data to send you emails all the times to maybe attract you to come more?
A specific example would be for if you have bought a seasonal ticket for, let's say, NAC Breda, right? You might get a mail once the season is done, like, hey, do you want to buy your seasonal ticket again? And essentially, let's say, in a total change of mind and spirit, you absolutely despise football afterwards. You don't want anything to do with it, but they still have the data of you. They know you have been there multiple times, and they still ask you to have that seasonal ticket, and that's also reflected in the marketing that you receive in Facebook. So it might not be necessarily clear that it is so important to sports, but it is important to basically every type of event, because they know you were there and they want you to get back. And that's also what Jeroen said, with the companies want to grow and they want to better their product and services, and that is a way to do that with data.
Yeah, they want to improve their events as well. So they're gonna use your data as well for that.
Yeah, and I think our approach for this was to kind of get you the awareness how many touch points we actually have, and that's also the case for the sports sector. I also have an example. I've had an internship at TSG Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga, and that was exactly during the time when the GDPR rules had to be implemented. So I was in the e-commerce department where we were responsible for the whole website and for the products, for the merchandising products. So we had a very tough time to delete all the data that that we're not allowed to use anymore. And like a merchandise shop is, I think, the perfect example where you're very likely that you get asked for cookies, and most of the time all of us are like, yeah, okay, I'll just accept because I'm too lazy to deny it. And yeah, that's kind of another example where big data, and in that regard also GDPR plays a huge role in the sports sector.
Thank you, it's much more clear now.
First of all, thank you. I have a total different questions than the others. On which way people will control companies if the company, so on which way people will control companies that they following the GDPR rules?
I mean, I think that's a government topic,
Well,
right?
to answer your question, I think that most of the companies should be aware of the GDPR policies and also the fines that come within it. And also, yeah, they have regularly checks on companies to make sure that the rights of each customer or individual are being respected. So, as we talked about all those different rights, you have to right to be informed and to which purpose your data is being used to. So there are regular checks on those.
All right,
So
thank you.
Can I add that all the individuals have the right to contact a company by email or sending a letter or something. So you can ask them if they can give your data, if they can show you what data they have from you. So you have the right to go to a company and say, I want my data, I want to know what kind of data you have for me.
Okay, thank you. It's more clear now.
So to add from Jari's question, how do you know as a consumer that the company deletes your data?
That's a very difficult thing that is actually almost impossible to know if a company deletes all the data. It's so difficult to know that because there are so many different backups that you need for all those data. So yeah, what we've searched online is that it's almost impossible to actually know, yeah, for sure that everything is clear.
That being said, you do have the right to erasure or the right to be forgotten. So if they don't do it, then that will result in a big fine for them. So they will be stupid eventually to not do that.
But still, I think it's it's a question we can't completely answer right now, but it's an important question. But I think that's not our position to answer. Nonetheless, thank you very much. I think we are in time pretty well. We had great fun with our panel discussion, and this is the end of today's episode of the GDPR panel discussion. So stay tuned and see you next time.